Welcome to Withdraw Consent. I'm Jack. Today we're going to do another episode in our villain series about Martin Luther King Jr. In this series, we look at the life, behavior, and goals and outcomes of an individual's life, and we try to determine whether or not they are a hero or a villain. I don't think anybody on either side is going to like my opinion on this, but I'm going to give it to you straight. So the reason why I'm doing this is because there was a controversy recently when this historian called Daryl Cooper went on Tucker Carlson and talked about Winston Churchill being the main villain of World War II, right? So then Daryl Cooper tries to defend himself on the internet, this and that. Dave Smith kind of speaks some things in his favor, who's a Jewish guy. And Daryl Cooper goes on Dave Smith's show, and I was watching that episode, which I normally don't watch because the amount of commercials is insane, both ad reads and commercials. Speaking of which, is brought to you by Noble Gold. No, I'm just kidding. Basically, Daryl Cooper's on there with Dave Smith, and they're talking about these load-bearing symbols. When a civilization has certain myths, right, and they're load-bearing symbols that cannot be attacked, right, because they're so fundamental to the nature of the country, like the Holocaust, the evils of Adolf Hitler, or the sainthood of Martin Luther King Jr. Got to make the episode. As soon as I heard that, I'm like, oh, it's on the list for this week, right? It's not that hard because I've researched a ton of this stuff over the last decades, and so I know a lot about it, but I learned a lot more, and I'm really glad I did this research because I changed my opinion. It just turns out, which is amazing. You guys are going to be pissed. So basically, we're going to talk about each different area of his life, and I'm just going to drag up all the muck I can on him, and we're going to talk about each thing, see whether or not each of those things is significant. Then we're going to talk about his achievements and accomplishments. Then we're going to weigh the scales, and I'm going to make my conclusion. You could put your conclusion in the comment below. I do think people have a lot of comments to say on this one. Okay. So I had heard this controversy about him changing his name. His name's not really Martin Luther King Jr. Okay, that's false. He was born Michael King. His dad, when he was 5, he was born in 29. At 34, his dad went to, on this trip, his church paid for it. He got to go to all these different places around the world. One of them was Berlin, 1934 Berlin. So this black man goes, 1934 Berlin, goes to a Baptist conference where they denounce racism. Wait, your cartoon history of world of 1934 Germany, none of it exists. A black man going there as a tourist to a Baptist convention where they denounce racism. That doesn't fit into your cartoon, what your kids are taught at school and stuff like that. Pretty nonsense. But that happens. And the funny thing about that is then the father becomes so enamored with Martin Luther of the Protestant Revolution that he comes home. I think he renames himself Martin Luther King, and then his son Martin Luther King Jr., his last name was already King, right? And so if you get renamed at 5, that's no saying on you. But it's hilarious that his father's going to name him after Martin Luther, who is the author of the book On the Jews and Their Lies, which we have an episode on. I'll put the link in the description below if you haven't seen it. That would be, it's just, the irony is pretty thick, right? So another thing about Martin Luther King Jr. that people say bad about him is that he plagiarized a lot of his work. And I did know that he plagiarized his doctoral thesis, so he's not like a real doctor. He's a fake doctor because he cheated, And then I wasn't even going to discuss this. I was just going to say that and then move on, right? So then I just do a little research so I can put a reference below for you. And I find that there's a Wikipedia page, and the Wikipedia page is called Martin Luther King Jr.'s Authorship Issues. So when a conspiracy theory gets so mainstream that they have their own Wikipedia page for it, proving to you that it's true, I can use Wikipedia as a reference. So that's the reference below. It's fascinating. I'm going to read you just about 4 slides from here. And the reason why I'm going to harp on this a little bit, I didn't realize how incredibly extensive. It's everything. Everything was a forgery, right? And so I just want to show you that real fast from Wikipedia. As Claiborne Carson, director of the King's Papers Project at Stanford University, has written, quote, instances of textual appropriation can be seen in his earliest extant writings as well as his dissertation. The pattern is also noticeable in his speeches and sermons throughout his career, end quote. Boston University, where King received his PhD in systematic theology, conducted an investigation that found he appropriated and plagiarized major portions of his doctoral thesis from various authors who wrote about the topic. According to civil rights historian Ralph Luker, who worked on the King's Papers projects, directing the research on King's early life, King's paper, The Chief Characteristics and Doctrines of Mahayana Buddhism, were taken almost entirely from secondary sources. He writes, quote, moreover, the farther King went in his academic career, the more deeply ingrained his patterns of borrowing language without clear attribution became. Thus, the plagiarism in his dissertation seemed to be, by then, the product of his long-established practice, end quote. Okay, so the guy didn't have any, it was all fake, his ideology. So I would say, like, if you're comparing him, he was a good orator, you know, but if you compare him to other good orators, say like a Winston Churchill, who I understand he was funded by a cabal of Jews and stuff like that, but, or like Adolf Hitler, they were writing their own stuff, you know, they weren't, it was like when you voted for them, it was genuinely them and their ideas, you know? I'd say another figure that falls in this category, I think it's fair to say, is Trump, right? And I'm not a crazy Trump guy, but he gets out there with no teleprompter. And what you're hearing is him. Normally you hear what some 24-year-old speechwriter has written, a 29-year-old editor has checked it out. Do you know what I'm saying? And you're just hearing something off a teleprompter, which is funny because I'm watching my notes off a teleprompter right now. That's pretty funny and ironic. But basically, at least I wrote them, I'll say, right? Okay. So that's where we're at with the plagiarism. We'll take that into the totality of things later. Now, another thing I knew about was that he was famous for like having extramarital affairs with white women and then calling them racial epithets and stuff like that while they were in the act, you know, and stuff like that. So I researched it and I found out there was more to it than that. The reason why this is documented is because basically the FBI was following him, tapping him stuff because of his communist ties. That's the next subject we're going to talk to after we talk about the abuse of women, right? So the stuff that I talked about did happen. And if you want to have consensual extramarital affair, like, whatever, and call racial epithets, do whatever you want. In the context of this human being, so he's a reverend and a prominent reverend, and I'll tell you, I don't do that stuff because I'm just a regular married man. I'm not a reverend, you know. But reverends who do that type of stuff, I despise them. Big TV, televangelists who do that, who do this type of adultery and stuff. I just can't stand them. So I can't stand the guy. He's a despicable, degenerate, just from front to back, just every part of him. He's disgusting, right? But it's even more than that, right? So basically, we're going to find out in the next one, we talk about the communism, how they got the wiretaps and stuff, but they're tapping them and they're looking for communist stuff in there, but they're finding all this sexual stuff. And basically these tapes, the audio of these tapes are going to be released in 2027 under a JFK act done in, I believe, 1990, where they have to release certain confidential documents. So under that act, they're going to be releasing, the audio is going to be released in 2027. But years ago, a guy who's a Pulitzer Prize winning author got to look at the transcripts, but he didn't get to hear the audio. And he wrote an 8,000 word article for somebody who bought it, and then they never published it. But basically, having read the transcripts and being a Pulitzer Prize winner, right? So he's not staking his whole reputation on this. He says this: the most damaging memos describe King witnessing a rape in the hotel room. Instead of stopping it, handwritten notes in the file say he encouraged the attacker to continue. So, if he did this is a crime, and I don't know why he never got arrested for this, or the guy who did it. So there's a girl out there who was attacked. She was the victim of rape, we'll say, and he wasn't arrested. So it's really crappy, honestly. You know, just terrible human beings. Now this may not have happened. We're going to find out in 3 years, and if it didn't, then he's just an adulterer who. Okay, whatever. But now we're going to go on to communism, right? And we're going to look at his ties there. And so this is a history.com article. I'm just going to read you a little bit about it real fast because these are just prominent figures that you know about. In early 1962, Attorney General Robert Kennedy approved a request from FBI Director J. Edgar Hoover to install wiretaps on the home and office of a New York City-based lawyer named Stanley David Levison. According to FBI informants, Levison had been an influential member of the Communist Party of the United States, CPUSA, as late as 1956. They believed he was now wielding influence in a different way, as a top advisor to the nation's most prominent civil rights leader, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. As King's fame and stature grew over the next several years, the FBI intensified its surveillance of him under its domestic counterintelligence program, COINTELPRO, arguing it was a matter of national security. While the Bureau's relentless scrutiny of King failed to reveal any communist leanings, it did turn up evidence of King's extramarital affairs. Hoover and his agents then tried to leverage that information not only to discredit and weaken King as a leader of the civil rights movement, but to blackmail him into taking his own life. Okay? So this guy, Stanley David Levinson, was a Jewish communist, and he was basically getting into the getting it so that he would have influence in the civil rights movement through Martin Luther King Jr., And they never had evidence that he himself, that Martin Luther King Jr. himself had any communist leanings. Okay, so if he would have been a communist, how would that have changed things? If he would have been pushing communism, how would that have changed things? Like, in my, like we've already talked about this, Victor and I have talked about this, but basically, like in my future world, you could study communism, you could read about communism, but we would literally make it illegal for you to pass out pamphlets promoting communism, create a communist party, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because we know just what a disaster it is, And in this country, there's no such laws of doing that. So I just don't understand why this is a big issue. And as it sits today, I listen to communists on YouTube, and they're Jewish communists I listen to. And it's like, like one of the programs I watch is Do Dissidents. Now, they're not really Jewish communists. They're two white guys with fully white ethnic backgrounds who don't do the Jewish religion. And they call themselves Jews because, let's see, it's not ethnicity, it's not religion, doesn't make any sense. So, but whatever, they're self-proclaimed, well, socialists, I'll say, whatever. But anyways, if I'm looking at a topic, right, and I'm like trying to analyze some piece of news, and the conservatives were giving me just nonsense, BS, pro-genocide stuff, just Christian Zionism, whatever they're giving me, I want to see what the communists have to say. I want to see, because sometimes they have really good takes on stuff. And let me tell you, let me interject in here. One of Victor's points about yesterday's episode and today's episode, right, is that he says, there's these good guys, there's the good Jews, like the David Goldberger of the ACLU who defended the Nazis in the Skokie case. There's the Do Dissidents guys that I was talking about. And he's like, but we're still deporting them, right? And I said, yeah, of course, it just goes without saying. Of course we're deporting them. But I went back to Martin Luther's, on the Jews and their lies. And he said that these people the Jews who've defrauded countries and just taken advantage of them through usury and all these other things should have their property stripped from them. That property should be given to the people it belongs, whether it be the French if you're in France, the Germans if you're in Germany, whatever, depending on the country. But in another scenario, it's like, if you're taking and deporting the Jewish banker who's made all of his wealth through usury and you're confiscating all of his wealth, that's one thing. And then the Do Dissidents guys are like, I guess we're going too, here's my stuff. It's like, no, we don't want your stuff. Take your stuff. You know what I mean? We don't care. The ACLU guy, take all your stuff, brother. Even if he made millions and millions and millions, if he was an honorable and just dude, you still get deported. Sorry. But they're a differential treatment. Anyways, so I don't really find it very interesting that there was this communist ties with Martin Luther King Jr. because it's not illegal, and he never did anything communist and all that. You know what I mean? So basically, we've looked at a lot of bad stuff with him. Now let's look at the good thing. Oh no, let's talk about Malcom X first. Actually, okay, let's go back. Okay, so Malcom X, we did an episode on it, a 2-part episode on the villain series where we turned out that Malcom X at the end was a hero. He did his entire redemption arc in beautiful story, I think. Not the way we told it, but the story itself. If you read his autobiography, it's beautiful in my opinion and riveting. And so, basically, Malcom X he talked terrible about Martin Luther King Jr., and here's what he said, right? So at the time he was thinking these thoughts, there were some precipitating cause, and then there were 1 million angry black men marching to Washington, D.C. for a 1 million man march. And Malcom X said, everywhere you look, you just see him. You see him getting on buses, you see him walking down the street, they're going to D.C. and they're pissed, So basically what happened is at that time, the establishment, the system, right, went and said, hey, we need to call together a meeting of the top 5 or 6 civil rights leaders, which includes Martin Luther King Jr., definitely does not include Malcolm X, because he's not a civil rights leader, remember. And so they all get together, and the system tells them, hey, look, it'd be great, 1 million man march. We could have white people, we could have black people, nice black people, we could have aid stations. We'll tell you where we're going to put them. We'll have these fences too, and we'll just tell you where to keep the people on the other side of the fence, right? We'll fund it. We'll fund everything. We'll fund you guys, And the black civil rights leader, who were sellouts, said, yes, let's do it. Could have it without all this, right? Because the million angry black men are on their way, right? Or we could get rich off of it. So they chose this choice, right? And Malcolm X derided them for this. They sold out their people. They told the black people to go home that were marching. They ended up doing the Million Man March. Malcolm X's critique was that civil rights will never succeed with white legs dangling next to black legs, like sitting on a bench, I guess, dangling. I don't know. I don't get why he said that, but that's what he said. So anyways, that was Malcolm X's criticism of him. Malcolm X changed his life a year before he died, became an amazing person, was going all over Africa, trying to unite black people, stuff like that. Terrific dude for black people. And then he died. And he didn't get to see the conclusion, though, right? He didn't get to see where it would go, what would happen, with civil rights. Like, where's it going to go? It's a long story. The story doesn't end in the 60s, doesn't end in the 70s. It's a long story. That's when the major events happened, right? In the 60s. So, in my opinion, and this is a bit controversial, basically, I'm going to say that the civil rights movement and civil rights laws being passed did not hurt the black community, but only helped it. I'm going to make that contention. And now there's a conservative talking point to say that that's not true, right? That's false, what I just said, right? Think about it, though. Where do you get the welfare state from civil rights laws, right? So if you want to talk about like New Deal or Great Society, or you want to talk about all these different laws that hurt the black community, that led to the fatherless, that led to the incarceration, and all this stuff, you want to talk about that, that's cool. But those aren't the civil rights laws. In my opinion, the civil rights laws are the things that got rid of Jim Crow laws. Did that hurt black people or help them? Go. Got rid of redlining. Did that hurt black people or help them? It helped them. It gave them more improved living situations, And segregation in schools. I'd say it neither helped nor hurt them. I would probably say, I'd say it hurt white people in some communities. I don't know. It's a mixed bag, but I'm not saying that that's what caused the fatherless problem in the black community. Is none of these things, So Martin Luther King Jr., in my opinion, is a guy who set out to achieve a goal, and he achieved it, right? He achieved the civil rights laws that he wanted to get passed. And Malcolm X's criticism, he never lived to see that achievement, right? And so basically, I'm going to make the conclusion here, and I'm going to say that this guy is a terrible human being. He forged everything, abused women. He had communist eyes, like whatever, but in the end, he achieved what he wanted to achieve. And in my opinion, he should be classified as a hero. And it's disgusting to say that because he's such a disgusting human being, But I'm not saying you should name your kids after him. I'm not saying you should model his behavior. Your kids shouldn't model his behavior. Your kids shouldn't look up to him. None of that stuff. But he achieved the objective, right? And if you achieve the objective, do you get the street named after you? Probably the worst street in town. They're going to name it MLK Jr. Drive, like whatever. I don't know why they do that. It's really terrible. But basically, so what I'm saying is he's a terrible human being, but he achieved the goal. And so history will remember him, rightly so, as a success in completing, to a degree, the civil rights movement, right? And when I pitched this idea to Victor, he said, okay. He said, Tom Hanks. I almost forgot the name. He's like, so you're telling me that I should watch Tom Hanks movies because I know who that guy is. And even though he makes great movies, I'll never watch a Tom Hanks movie again. I just can't, right? And I said, no, you shouldn't watch Tom Hanks movies, even if they are great movies. He's trash, and everything you think of him, if you think about stuff that man has done, then it's not worth your mental health. You become so infuriated, And so I'm not saying model any behavior after this guy or anything, but just admit that he was successful in what he did. Because I can admit Tom Hanks is a successful movie guy. I could do that fine, and I could say I also don't want to watch any of his movies because he's trash, And you can look at Kevin Spacey. Kevin Spacey does all types of. He killed somebody, didn't he? Run somebody over and kill him, and then he just got away with it. And he does all these things with very young men. We'll say, I think, but he's a phenomenal actor. You can't say he's not. The House of Cards, have you watched it? It's phenomenal acting. And that's what I'm saying about Martin Luther King Jr. He succeeded. He's trash. He's complete trash, but he succeeded. So if you want to put him in the villain category, how do you overcome the fact that he succeeded? The only way you could do that is by saying the civil rights movement was a catastrophe for the black community by causing fatherlessness, incarceration, and all drug use and all this other stuff. And if you want to do that, then explain to me what I've missed. Like how is redlining, Jim Crow laws, segregation schools, how is this civil rights related stuff? And black people could have been successful without civil rights. Don't get me wrong, and they could have been successful with civil rights, but civil rights weren't the things that hurt their community, like the welfare state and stuff like that. Okay, so this entire conclusion, the guy's such a terrible human being. It makes me feel dirty to have the conclusion that he's the hero, but I just want to let you guys know that everything's going to be okay. In order to prove this to you, I have a picture here that me and my son took at great risk at the hotel where Martin Luther King Jr. was assassinated to bring you this message of peace that everything's going to be okay. And the sun was in our eyes. And there was gaggles of black folk all around. We had to wait for him to mob off. Anyways, that's what I've got for you. So I'm working on this locals account, right? And so basically I envision locals as at free. You could get the app on your phone. It's really easy to sign into if you also have a Rumble account, because you could just click sign in on Rumble and it will do that for you, which is very nice, honestly. So basically I've been working on it and posting some stuff there. And I got this idea that I want to do, and it's completely free, right? But I'm just going to try it once today, because we're just trying to start getting people over there. I don't know how many people will be over there yet by the time that this video is posted, but today's the 22nd and this video will be posted the beginning of next month or something. So I'm going to put a post up there, right? And the post is going to be called, I don't know, I'm just going to make something up at the time. It's going to be called, was Martin Luther King Jr. a hero or a villain, right? I'm just going to put that post up there at 10 a.m. on Thursday when this video goes live. And if you want to, you can have the discussion on locals, right? You can go on there and argue with each other over hero, here's why, villain, here's why, Jack's right, Jack's wrong. He missed this fact. He was a villain because he killed 3 people stuff that I don't know about, whatever, you can all go put it on there. And I think it would be good to get people together where they could all argue in one place or discuss stuff, give future ideas, stuff like that. And so for controversial videos, I think I want to start putting it, I wouldn't put a post on there for, say, Monday's video, which was about the Churchill and the Gallipoli catastrophe, because it's not that controversial. This is controversial. I want to hear what you guys have to say. So come over and join us on Rumble, on Locals. It's absolutely free. You could just click follow and you go for free. You can click subscribe if you want to, and you can subscribe and you could do a monthly or a one-time. You could do that if you want, but when I'm saying come over, just come over for free. You get advance notice of what episodes are coming out. I'm going to put small clips on there from different stuff I'm downloading to insert into videos, and you get to see that. You also get to talk to each other once enough people get over there. Anyways, that's all I got for you. Have a great weekend. Hope to see you next week.